to leave in 7 hours for a showing of Star Wars, but other than that, we've got 8 hours apparently.
Yeah, I'm thinking we're just gonna shoot for an hour.
An hour sounds great.
I think
That's what we're shooting for.
Okay.
That. Okay, great. We're streaming live. I just checked the YouTube channel.
Fantastic.
I don't need that echo. All right. So Lisa, you want to kick it off?
Well, we can kick it off. We'll wait just a couple of more minutes to officially kick it off, since it's not quite 4.
That's true.
And the experience of the past sort of online chats is, it takes people a while to log it on and figure it out if they've not used it in a while.
That's true. We just lost Joanna.
Well, hopefully she'll be back.
I hope so. All right.
Yeah, our goal today is really simple. We're just going to chat about course planning. And we're going to do that in a very informal, kind of free-for-all. And then my goal is just to sort of be moderator or facilitator to just keep things moving. Or fill in this space, like right now, the dead space.
As far as I'm concerned, this is already a success.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just realized that I don't know what button mutes my mic or unmutes my mic, and I just figured that out. So you probably just heard me eat.
Well, it's all right.
That's fine.
It just takes some time to figure all that out.
Oh, yeah.
Hello.
Oh, hey, Kegel.
Hey.
Look at that. Kegel's even got her video so we can see her.
I know. Shocking. Welcome to my lovely home.
Excellent.
So, was that Mike?
It was.
Hi, Mike.
Hello. How are you?
Good. Ready to shift gears from grading to thinking about the spring. Yeah.
I like
Well, and if nothing
spring
else,
well.
if we get bored with talking about the spring, we can just whine to one another and, do our own form of group therapy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Carefully moderated.
Typically
this is live and being broadcast.
Yeah, and typically on a Friday about this time of the day, I have some sort of adult beverage, but I'm trying to be an adult and professional in the sense that this is getting recorded live. So I don't mind, admitting out loud for YouTube forever that I typically am drinking by this time of the day. But
it's almost Friday. 5. It's 4 p.m.
But I thought at least this week I wouldn't have one in my hand.
Well, that's why the video's off.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord, we are...
It's that time of year.
Yes, it is.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
You gonna take some notes, Kegel?
I have my notes for my class that I'm working on.
My Lord.
Yeah.
Good for you.
I know. I'm like, well, I have a, you'll hear all about it here in a second, but I have a brand new prep that has 70 students. So,
okay, I was about to cuss there, and I'm gonna try to control the cussing too.
It's getting recorded. Yeah, so I'm deep in the weeds of figuring out how to make that work.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's one class. There's not multiple sessions.
Yeah, one class, no TAs.
Wow.
I know.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
We've have several more people joining up. We are right now, for all you newcomers, we are just chatting because we knew it would take people who wanted to join us probably a few minutes to get online. Most of you probably had to click a button that said you understood that that when you joined, it was going to be recorded on a YouTube stream. I just want to remind you of that what you say is going to be on the YouTube stream. So just keep that in mind. I am Lisa Molasaw. I'm going to facilitate our conversation today. And what that means is I'm just going to keep us moving forward, hopefully. It's going to be a very informal sort of get together, and we'll officially kick it off in probably another minute because there's a whole slew of people trying to get on. So we're just going to wait just another minute.
This is a nice turnout.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Welcome.
Yeah, the deep welcoming voice, that's Michael Trice.
Hello.
Who arranged everything, all the technology for us today.
Just barely.
Well, you volunteered to do it.
That's true. I did do that. It's working out well so far.
Yeah, look at that. They're like people, and it's so cool. And it's not just those of us who thought this was going to be a good idea. There are other people too.
There are
A
more people
success!
on the email list. I'm excited. Yeah.
I would have been happy with just the people who were talking about it originally because this is
Yeah.
going to be useful for me. But it is exciting to see even more.
Okay, we are going to officially kick off now that it's 3 after, and we can't wait all day if we're going to get chatting. So again, I'm Lisa Molasan. You are at Faculty Office Hours, which was this interesting grassroots kind of effort that started on Twitter one evening. I think that conversation was after 8 at night on Twitter, and it just got it started that we were conversing about courses and how to approach something. I don't remember exactly what the exact topic was, but it ended up with this, wouldn't it be great if faculty had their own office hours to kind of talk about these things? And everybody said, you know, the stragglers, which ended up being Sarah Gunning, Cagle, Sarah Doan, and Mike Trice. And we determined this might be a good idea, so let's give it a flipping shot. And that is why we are all now here today on the Google Chat. If you've not done online virtual chats like this, it is helpful if everybody mutes their microphone, which you should be able to find if you hover over your Hangout screen up at the top. Unless you want to talk, and we want everybody to talk. It's also good to have the group chat open because you can start to chat with each other and with all of us over there. And we're going to try to take some notes in that because we can capture that later. And as we've said a couple of times, this is being live streamed. Our goal today is to talk about course prep, kind of general strategies at first, and then we're going to talk about our particular courses that we might be teaching in the spring. But it's all going to be totally informal. We really didn't plan a whole lot except the topic and the idea that we would start with a very simple introduction. So if everybody can just start to unmute yourself and just tell us your name and what courses you're teaching in the spring. Mike?
I can go first, or
okay, Cagle, hit it.
Okay, so I'm Cagle. I'm at the University of Kentucky, and I'm teaching 2 courses in the spring. One is Introduction to Tech Comm, which is actually code for communication for engineers. And it is a graduation writing requirement that's mostly engineers, although we also have some equine science, I said Kentucky, and agriculture students in there. So it's a pretty kind of basic 200 level tech comm class that I've taught before. The other one is a 200 level gen ed humanities course. It fulfills the humanities course. So we use it as recruiting for our majors because I'm in a standalone rhetoric department. And it is a course on social media, which is very exciting. But 1, it is a new prep, and 2, I have 70 students and no TA. So that was 70 students. So that's a big prep for me right now.
Lord help you.
Wow. I can go next. So I have a good idea of the 3 classes. So I teach in a fully embedded WID program at MIT, and I'll be teaching what 2014, which is a mechanical engineering systems design course, which is a build course, which means that they're implementing a design that they worked on in the previous term. And that is primarily, for my case, implementing a number of project status updates and working on team dynamics lessons and workshops over the course of that class. I also co-coordinate a the communication component of our largest, what I believe is our largest class at the Institute. It is computer systems design, and it has about 400 students, and we have a faculty and staff of that class of right around 20 plus TAs. And so that's a weekly tutorial that communication instructors teach in that course. And then I will be working on a graduate seminar course in Aeroastro for new doctoral students trying to frame their research questions.
Wow, interesting. Dr. Gunning, would you like to go next?
Oh, sure. I'm Sarah Gunning, and I teach at Towson University in Baltimore, and I am teaching a web design course, which is always being updated. And this semester, I'm going to have a GA teacher. She can get some experience as she finishes up her master's, and scientific and technical writing course at the undergraduate level.
So the scientific and technical writing course, is that like the service course at your university, or is it more for majors?
It's like the service course plus one, so it's mostly project management majors and environmental science majors.
Okay.
Half and half.
Okay. Thank you. Next.
Hi there, I'm Sarah Doan. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And I'm not sure what I'm teaching next semester, so we're going to be very agile about it.
Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome, Lisa.
Next. Anyone?
Hi. Vacuum. This is Alice Myatt. I'm at the University of Mississippi. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Partly because I am breaking in a new Surface Pro, so I've had it all of 3 days. So it took me a while to realize that funny little something on the screen was actually my lunch cooler. Anyway, I teach at the University of Mississippi. We are a standalone writing and rhetoric department, and I will be teaching in the spring digital rhetoric. And it is a course that is part of our minor in professional writing and also our digital studies minor. And then I also am teaching a graduate level welcome to writing pedagogy class for the TAs. And I've got some English ed people in there as well. But I wanted to listen to what everyone had to say about course development because we're sort of in the midst of that, and I'm just really interested. We do not have a major yet. We have the 2 minors. We also are home to speech, and we've been developing courses, and we are going to apply soon to our institutes of higher learning to get approved, we hope, for a writing major. So that's just a little bit about me. And this is a great idea. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, Alice. Next, anyone?
Yeah, I will give this a go. I'm Beck Wise. I'm at the University of New England in Australia, not the one in, I think, Maine. I'm in a standalone writing program within a School of Arts. We do a lot of, we integrate creative writing with professional and academic and pretty much everything anyone can think of. And I'm going to be teaching writing for work in the spring, which, like Kegel's class, is quite a big one. Probably looking at about 110 students, and I'll have grading support, but not teaching support.
If. And I just put together your message in the chat with who you are, and it's like, oh yes, you're Beck. Yeah. Why does it say that?
Yes, I am logged in an account that has a wrong name attached to it. Yeah, all of my classes, that big or bigger, we teach lecture-style writing courses, which is a whole thing on its own.
Yeah, which is interesting. Tracy, do you want to pop in here?
Hi, I'm Tracy. I teach, Tracy Gardner. I teach at Virginia Tech. I am scheduled to teach 4 sections of technical writing. It is our service course for all of our engineers and scientists and environmental majors, all of those sorts of folks.
Wonderful. Thank you. Joanna? Are you with us?
I am. I am teaching 2 sections of professional editing and 1 section of writing in the workplace. The writing in the workplace class is not our service course, but many of our majors do not take the service course. So some of the things that we normally teach in the service course end up in that class. But I'm trying to make sure that they're very different. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it actually does.
And of course, it's a totally writing for technical writing and business writing are 2 very different rhetorical situations, of course, but that's not always apparent to students.
Yes, very true. Oh, Lord, I didn't know there was a limit in the damn Hangout. Okay, well, we'll have to change our technology for the next time. Jeff, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jeff Clegg. I'm at Midwestern State University. We'll be teaching 4 sections of business writing in the spring, one of which will have an emphasis on disability in the workplace, and also trying to make our new online courses more ADA compliant.
It's a big task.
Oh, it's a fun task.
Yes, absolutely, but big task.
Oh, yeah.
Well, welcome. We're going to let Sarah Doan take the floor very briefly. She has volunteered to kind of give us an insight into how she goes about thinking about course construction and design and preparing for particularly new classes. And what I thought was great about Sarah volunteering was that she volunteered, but even more so as a PhD candidate, I find it extraordinarily fascinating to hear sort of the newer perspectives, those people just coming into the field of the broader technical and professional communication and kind of how they see things. And so it gives us a different perspective than say somebody, old and stodgy like myself. So Sarah, hit it.
All right. Hello, everybody. I don't have any visual aids, but I thought about making them. So just getting that out of the way first. But when I plan a course, I really draw on a lot of the training I had as a composition instructor. I taught for 2 years doing freshman comp during my master's, and I had a lot of support there. And then I've also taught freshman comp in my PhD work. So there's been a lot of teacher training that comes from rep comp that I draw on when I'm doing this kind of work to plan my classes. So I approach planning a new course through looking at assignments really closely. What do I want to be teaching? What's my goal in doing this? And then I go ahead and I make an index card for each assignment. I find it's just not something I can do super easily on a screen. So then along with each of those index cards for the assignment, I start writing down whatever ideas I have for scaffolding. What do students need to know when they are doing that assignment? What's going to help them succeed? And I try to kind of work backwards from those assignments into my course planning and what I'm going to have them do each day in class. Once I have my classroom activities decided on, then I map everything onto a big paper copy of my syllabus that I print out. And I use a little sticky note for every reading and for every class activity. So that way I can still move things around. And I can see everything in one place, and I find I can't do that as easily on a screen. There's just something really satisfying about using all my office supplies to help me create something beautiful and hopefully useful to my students and I. So I really focus on kind of working backwards. What's my final portfolio assignment going to look like? And then how can I work backwards from that to the beginning of the semester, planning around things like taking prelim exams or any conferences I'm going to make sure that I'm going to have enough bandwidth throughout the semester to really focus on my students and my scholarship. So that's my basic process, and I'm really excited to hear from the rest of you as well.
I love the fact that you are trying to match what you're doing in your classes to the rest of your life so that you don't make that mistake that I still oftentimes make. of having things due when I'm out of town, or having everything due in all the classes at the exact same time. And I like this visual aspect too of being able to move stuff around.
Yeah, it's really helpful.
So Kegel, what is, as you're starting this new course that you're working on, what was your process in doing that?
So very similar to what Sarah was talking about in terms of trying to work backwards, but with the difference that I find with professional and technical writing courses, I often start with assignments, right? I have particular, usually genre-based ideas about what I want a final portfolio or set of assignments to look like. But with the social media class, it's a big class. There aren't any sort of specific learning outcomes attached to it beyond the kind of generic humanities gen ed requirements. So it was harder for me to wrap my head around like assignments. So instead I just made, started a master list of topics actually. So I actually have it right here. You can see my master list.
Lord.
So it's
Good
things
for
like,
you.
things like bots, fake news, selfies, brand cultivation, mimetic culture, work theft, trolling, radicalization, trigger warnings, just all kinds of topics that might be relevant or interesting. And then what I've been trying to do is figure out which of those lend themselves to a particularly rhetorical discussion so that I can narrow that down to sort of 3 or 4. I'm really excited about it, Tracy. It's going to be so fun. I just saw that in the chat. So that I can do things that are interesting with the students and talk about topics that are interesting, but also use it as a way to showcase our major. Because again, this is kind of a recruiting class. The other thing that I've been trying to do as I plan this course is be really thoughtful from the jump about what it's going to look like to do any of this stuff with 70 students. So I'm thinking about things like taking attendance, right? What is that going to look like? So my plan right now is to have them do, we use Canvas as our learning, oh my God, why am I blanking?
Learning management system.
Thank you. I was like, LMT? That's not a thing. LMS. And so having them do a little like 2 or 3 question reading quiz at the beginning of class that's password locked. So they have to be in class to get the password to do the thing, like that kind of thing. So to some extent, I am letting the size of the class drive some of the decisions I'm making about pedagogy in terms of like in-class activities.
But that's smart.
Yeah.
You have to.
Yeah.
Let's be practical. It's kind of the same approach that we take when we when we're teaching a grad class or a smaller undergraduate seminar, to where we know we're only going to have 15 students. You can do a lot in that that you could never do in 70 students. And so that's just super smart to think through really the practicalities, you know, down to what does the flipping room look like and how is that going to impact what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was another thing I did actually, was like go visit the room as soon as it got assigned to try and figure that out. So right now I'm in a place where I have a pretty good sense of what topics I want to talk about. And then I am doing very much what Sarah did, where I'm trying to attach readings to those. What I don't have right now is assignments. So that's actually my big goal for the next week or so, is to develop assignments. 2 folks at my in my department have taught this course before, so I have assignment ideas that I can pull from. But the course has not sort of settled yet into, like, there were problems that they have told me about with all of those assignments. So I'm still trying to kind of figure that piece out.
What drove the decision to have 70 people?
Recruiting. We see most students either in first-year composition, at which point many of them have declared majors that perhaps they haven't had a chance to figure out that aren't, in fact, what they want to do.
Right.
And then we see them later when they're juniors and seniors and they're doing their graduation writing requirement courses, which are the technical communication and professional writing courses typically. And so we're trying to create more face time with more students in that in between, that kind of sophomore window.
Just being nosy, because back down in Australia, that's kind of the model, to do the big lecture and then do other things, right? Or am I making that up?
Oh, you were spot on. There's not a lot of rhetoric and writing type units down here. I would say Sydney University is kind of the closest to what you all are going to be familiar with in the US. My institution is kind of a special case because we are mostly a distance ed institution. So I teach something like 80% of my students are online, and then I have an on-campus cohort, typically about 30 or 40 students. Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of my courses I run is a workshop with no lecture component, and this writing for work unit that I'm teaching next term is going to be my first lecture tutorial one, and I have no idea how it's going to work.
Yeah. I just saw, I think Sarah asked in the chat about using clickers in classes for in-class meetings, work, reading quizzes, and the like. I never have. And I was actually sort of hoping that somebody in the chat today would have experience with that to tell me. I think I need someone to give me permission to try it, maybe.
Well, you should. Now, I've never used them, but this sounds really strange. I've never used them in my own class, but I did teach a workshop at our Teaching and Learning Center on how to incorporate them into the class. And they can be extraordinarily effective, particularly to get some of that ongoing involvement from 70 students. It's a lot. So if you can craft some of those activities in class that have easy answers, yes, no, ABC, those sorts of things, they can be very useful and at least keep people awake and, halfway involved. Not that you wouldn't keep them awake, Kegel, but does anyone else want to share their kind of overall approach to building a course? I love this, that there was some overlap between Kegel and Sarah's approach, but then it's also different based on the type of courses that we're teaching.
Yeah, I would.
Oh, great, Sarah, thank you.
So what Kegel was talking about with identifying the topics, I tend to teach night classes for the grad students and then day classes for the undergrads. So we meet once a week,
oh God, yes.
Actually, and I think it's been really useful to collect some of those topics and then see how they, parent-child each other, and see how one theme could be presented one week, one theme could be presented the next week, and then build on previous things that we've talked about. So I try and hash those out just to organize myself, and then also to just kind of give the class meeting time a theme that we can investigate. Like accessibility is going to be our major theme today for documentation and web design and all these other things. So let's look at the ways that we can bring ideas into this, I guess, I don't want to call it a genre, but this output that we're creating in the workplace, right? So I think that's been really helpful. And it helps organize the conversation a little bit if we get off topic, because that can happen in 3 hours.
Oh, Lord, yeah. That was standard operating procedure for me in those 3 hours. It's okay, about halfway through, we're going to go down a rabbit hole and then get ourselves back. And that just goes to the material, again, the material dimensions of the courses that we're teaching and the need to match how we're approaching that course design to 3 hours, 50 minutes, an hour and 15 minutes, 70 students, 15 students, graduate students, undergrad students. It's all, it never ceases to amaze me how many things we have to consider when we're putting a syllabus together.
Yeah. In the chat, so Jeff, thank you. Jeff mentioned that he's used the clickers before, but that there's kind of a time limit before student burnout. And then Sarah and Joanna both talked about Poll Everywhere. Which
that's the one.
An app. And I would love to hear, Jeff, if you don't mind saying a little bit about what you mean by burnout, like students get disinterested or what. And then I would love to hear a little more about Poll Everywhere, how that works. Because that might be useful even in small classes.
Okay, so with clickers, what I noticed was that if you spent, 5 to 10 minutes, it usually was pretty fine. But after 10 minutes, most students got burned out or disinterested, and they wanted to actually go back to lecture. or individual activities. So it also has, I mean, it has some good portions to it if you have some students who are hard of hearing or deaf.
Mm-hmm.
However, with blind students, completely obscures them to think about. But what I would say is I have friends who are in chemistry who use it for 50-minute traditional classes as well as 120-minute classes. And most of those students end up hating it by midterm when it's used extensively throughout. So just, use it as a way of when I taught secondary, what we called warm-ups, and that'll be fine.
Yeah, and everywhere. Thank you all for remembering that. I've been sitting here beating my head against the wall going, what was that tool? So I love that little tool.
Yeah. The one last question on the clickers, does most clicker technology track to specific students so you could use it for attendance, or is it just, it does? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So then Poll Everywhere, y'all who have used that?
So the Chronicle of Higher Education actually just came out with an article that reminded me of the existence of Poll Everywhere this week. It's a good read, and it has some nice ideas for active pedagogy based on quizzing students through Poll Everywhere. So students answer a little quiz question like, in one word, name or label what you think the fruit in the poem Goblin Market is. Asking quizzes about the reading to make meaningful contributions to class, and then asking students to defend their position to their peers. So I can send the link with that once I'm done speaking. But I used it a little bit when I was teaching freshman composition at Iowa State. And my students liked it, but that was because they had it integrated into our technology classroom. So everybody had a device. It's just making sure that people have it or have a way to actually use it is the problem. So depending on your tech levels, that might be the case or might not be.
Yeah, clickers are like $25 at my school, and they just buy them at the bookstore. But I think, like, I've used them to check in with students just periodically to see if they're getting the major theme that I've wanted them to get. So, like, if it was a 3-hour class, I might do like 2 clicker check-ins, like at the 45-minute mark and the next 45-minute mark, and that works out okay.
What other strategies, kind of broad strategies for planning courses, do people have that haven't already been mentioned? So we've talked about topics or starting with assignments, and there's the educational moves that you need to always think about what your outcomes, what do you actually want students to learn, and that matches to assignments and activities. Anything else that people have tried in their approach to?
So one thing that I'm a little surprised of, I guess, given the nature of what we're doing here, is that talking to other members within the department or talking to other faculty and staff hasn't come up as a means of prep. And I guess for us, that's a sort of default because we work in group staffs of, like I said, 5 to 20 people. But being able to sort of gather that repository of knowledge of other people who have taught the class before, and what has worked and what hasn't worked, and being able to iterate on those sort of activities. I guess I'm curious what kind of archive knowledge people work with in their class prep.
Okay, so when you say archive, like the stuff that we draw on, what is it?
Sure. Well,
Try
like
again.
the community knowledge there. I mean, it's probably not archived. It's probably more of an oral tradition in that sense. But when you're talking with other people, when it's not a new class, as in Kegel's case, I mean, what sort of materials are you drawing upon within the department?
That is an interesting question. And I think what came to me as we were talking on Twitter that night is the fact that we oftentimes end up developing courses by ourselves.
Yeah.
Even if we might send a message and say, what have you done recently? Or, if you're in the throes of it. But sadly, I I can't tell you a time that I've developed something more collaboratively with people in my department, because the timing, I think, is just all wrong.
Mhm.
We should. It's just, wow, what a great question.
It's actually
Does anyone have like mentoring or anything like that?
I think a lot of new faculty do this, or I would hope that they would, is that when you're at a new place or wanting to improve things, that you would head down to your teaching and learning center. And so I did that, and I went through a couple of like course redesign seminars, and those were probably some of the most important things to teach me how to build a course and to rethink how I did it. But again, that was of my own initiative, wasn't really encouraged by my department. And so this idea of mentoring around teaching is really kind of interesting. And I think this is why we've gotten so much positive feedback on just this idea to have a faculty office hours.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You guys have like
The people in the chat. Oh, I'm sorry, Sarah.
Go ahead.
There's a couple of people in the chat who've talked about the fact that they actually have some online repositories that they use in order to share materials from a few shared drives and online materials. Our Dropbox.
This is something that I was thinking about when you said archive, Mike. I immediately thought of like that, like a document or a thing archive, not the sort of oral history mentoring piece. It seems like two different pieces. And I have good mentoring in my department. I think that's a benefit of being in a standalone rhetoric department. Partly is that there are a lot of people to draw from. So I'm good on that front, but I found myself just recently realizing, so this is my 9th year of teaching, I guess. So I'm officially have the good problem of being at a point where I forget what I've already done. And I find myself occasionally redeveloping the wheel and need a better system for not doing that and for storing that great idea that someone gave me that I'm not teaching that class this semester, but next time around, I want to make sure that I use that activity or something. And so I would love to hear more about that archive piece specifically of how people are keeping tabs on like just the material as you've already developed that maybe you don't use every semester, so you don't necessarily have them at the front of your mind.
The chat that's going on in the YouTube channel is really interesting about people have these kind of shared spaces, but as Tracy said, hers is unloved and festering. And I think happens to a lot of us. We get this great idea and then we just get tired, or I wish I had my camera on, that it's on a little scrap piece of paper and you don't know where to put it. So I don't know. I'm sorry, Jeff, I cut you off.
In 2014 or 15, I had suggested to CPTSC or whatever that I'd proposed that we begin an oral history plus an actual documentary history archive for technical writing that would include old syllabi, any kind of material that we can get on mentorship practices. And I'd left the institution I was at, so I'd never heard back. It's been lost up in the air, but that was one of the ideas I wanted to go for, was to take some of the progenitors of technical writing, as well as people like myself who are visiting assistants and new faculty, and really get together and have something tangible that we can look at that would be hosted by the organization on the website.
In part, that's being developed right now as we speak.
Damn it. Well, there goes that idea.
Yeah. Which will be great because it will provide an archive of sort of programmatic and curricular sorts of materials. But I think that's just one piece of the puzzle, right? It also involves that we need these kinds of conversations, the oral parts, and to continue to, I don't know, innovate in how we do things.
Yes.
So one of the best ways that I've learned as a TA is to have other TAs add me as a student to their course modules on D2L or their LMS systems once the semester is over. So I can't see any of their students' grades or work, but I can see how they paced the course, and I can see how they've interacted with their students, particularly in an online course where it might not be super obvious just looking at assignment sheets and looking at other course materials without looking at the whole LMS. So that's been really helpful.
Yeah, and the whole move to taking a course and putting it online, that's its own set of ickiness right there. But other thoughts or strategies, I feel like we could really just talk about this whole archive kind of mentoring thing, for the rest of our time. Joanna, you want to jump in?
I was just going to jump in and say, I started designing my classes like I do my online classes and thinking in terms of modules and units more than I do. I think I used to develop my face-to-face classes more holistically, and now I think I chunk it like I do my online classes. If that does that make any sense?
Yes, it totally makes sense.
So then I start grouping readings and things around
the different units, and that kind of intersects or complements with this idea that we talked about earlier about using topics to kind of drive what we're going to cover in a course. And then, you could have several topics within that module or within a unit. It's a really smart way of doing it. Other thoughts about general course construction and how we manage to share materials?
I've on the sharing materials front. So I think Sarah just now, I didn't catch who was saying it because I was over on the YouTube stream, talking about getting added as a student to LMSs after the semester is over, so you have access to that sort of full suite. And I totally agree, particularly for online courses, that you don't get a real sense of a course just from a syllabus and assignment sheets, right? You need to see sort of the communications and stuff. But that's a very particular way to get at those, right? You have to be added specifically, and those can go away. And I have found myself when I build online courses, if I'm not building them elsewhere and then porting that material in, then I have to do the work later. And I've done this, like go back and copy and paste every single assignment prompt, every single like weekly email that I send to students, all that stuff. And so I'm wondering if people have strategies for capturing that stuff that otherwise can get sort of closed off in the LMS. Is it just a matter of keeping it in two places, which is kind of what I'm doing right now, I guess?
Yeah, we keep a lot of that in a centralized website. We have a WordPress site where we keep a lot of activities and lesson plans and materials that we attempt to organize by categories and concepts so they can be used across classes.
I was going to say that because I've occasionally used WordPress sites like that too. It helps, and you can privatize it, unlike or you can use a wiki, which will allow for better organization.
Yeah, Chris Andrews at
Corpus Christi,
was saying that they use a wiki as well.
Well, I think a lot of us programmatically have kind of shared things for these, particularly for the service course, right? Because if you are teaching a ton of students with a wide variety of instructors who have a wide variety of diverse backgrounds and experiences, you have to have some sort of uniformity. And so I think that's the only one course that I can think of that we do a lot of sharing, not only just within a program, but also across programs, which is something that these sorts of conversations that we're having, like right now today, it's so useful. And to be able to start to share knowledge outside of just our localized context to really improve how we're teaching our courses, which is great.
So I had a question on material prep in advance. So we're very resource limited from a time standpoint. And so one of the things that I've done in an attempt to get around that, and as a department we've done to some degree, is attempt to put some of the teaching material online, particularly in video format. I was wondering if anyone was working in sort of auxiliary video lessons that they were implementing. I mean, I don't really want to quite talk about it in terms of sort of secondary flipped classroom, but if you do use video, sort of what sort of concepts are you comfortable sort of implementing in a video for feedback form versus a lecture or class activity form?
You know, I'll just say it here to save Jeff Clegg from having to say it later. I don't use a lot of video because to do it well and to make them truly accessible, it takes a ton of time. And so I know that there are all of these online checklisty things that are talking about, you know, just do a little 2-minute little video. You can just do it right there in iMovie and it's done. And it really is. It's super simple. But then that sucker also needs to be closed captioned and it needs to have a transcript.
Mm-hmm.
And those two processes, if done right, are labor intensive.
Yes.
And so while I like the idea of video, particularly in an online course, to give this a better sense of community and so people can see you and interact and can sort of feel your energy or what have you as an instructor, we cannot forget those accessibility issues.
I have a article coming out in March on captioning and videos and teaching students how to caption that I piloted at Penn State. And if you have a class that is made up of able-bodied people, it's perfect. But with the type of student base that we have, no matter where we go, we can never play that kind of Russian roulette. You know, if you want to look at something, look at the Penn State statement from when they were sued by the National Federation of the Blind.
Oh, you know, hundreds of universities have been sued. Poor Penn State is not the only one.
Well, UC Berkeley took off all of their online video instructional material because they didn't want to do the $5 million in upgrades. Mm-hmm. So be very wary.
Yep.
Yeah. So Michael, I didn't want to, you know, hijack your great idea and your great question, but I just had to get that out there.
Well, yeah, I think that. So I think that we have to acknowledge that the transcripting and the captioning it is labor intensive to do it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I'd want to rule it out just because that additional amount of labor has to go into it. I think if anything, that might make it more selective in the amount of instruction that you would provide.
Yeah, I would agree. And in some ways, it would encourage the thinking through as to why do I really want a video of this particular topic or question or module, and why would it be most important here? And, you know, immediately coming to mind, just explaining the preliminary or the context of certain assignments, that's probably where I would do a video.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. Jeff, do you have the article and issue that you can share with us?
Can you say that?
The journal?
Do you have the article and issue, the journal and the article name?
It will be Business and Professional Communication Quarterly.
Nice.
I forget what my title was. Unheard Voices.
Yeah, the two issues of BCPQ that are coming out in the first part of next year are both around accessibility. Mm-hmm. And there's quite a few really great pieces that are very practically focused.
I would, one thing you might want to think about, which Socio Oswald talks about, is participatory design. So if you do this, you might want to work hand in hand with different disabled communities where they can work in tandem with you to give you some of the implicit feedback you need on what works and what doesn't work. Because there is a lot of nuance, and even with a short 2-minute video, there are things that you have to include that, you know, you might not think about that they can help out with. And I know with MIT, you have a lot of different types of programs that are affiliated with your university.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it's good to be able to think these through. So I look forward to reading through those.
One thing that my university has pushed in particular with videos and multimedia is to have the Accessibility Resource Office do captioning. The only downside is that it takes about 2 weeks, which I do not always have in my course planning. So it might be worth checking with those offices as well.
That's great.
And a rather odd kind of question, or point, but it's a very important one. Oftentimes, if you use one of your university's like the accessibility office to help you with that, you no longer own the intellectual property of that thing. It belongs to the university. So you need to also check with your contract if you're at a union school or the lawyer's office as to whether or not, if you make that move, if it's still yours to use.
Or
at
even
will.
places like when I was at Penn State, you had 44,000 students with 5 people in the disability office. The same thing at Western Michigan, where you had 33,000 and only 4. So time is going to be a major part of it. 2 weeks, it would take months at Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Joanna makes that great point that the onus of accessibility is typically offloaded on faculty, and faculty, unfortunately, across the board, know very little about it in the sense of, and the technicalities, the legal aspects, all of it. It gets extremely complicated, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have these conversations and continue to question and educate ourselves.
Mm-hmm. There's in the YouTube chat, there's some good conversation about specifically with videos and captioning. So Chris made the point that there's a thinking about committing stuff to video that you know you're going to use again and again in later semesters, as opposed
That's
to
a great point.
Yeah, and so that means that the time sunk into captioning and writing transcripts is worth it if you know you're going to keep teaching that same service course. And now I'm thinking about that for my engineering writing one.
Yeah, but you know, the service course, the one beauty of it is that it doesn't change a lot. Mm-hmm. But then the other aspect of it, it's also the place that we should be innovating in the most. And so to also plug a special issue that's coming out, our own Joanna Schreiber, who's on the chat today, has edited a special issue about the service course and technical and professional communication that'll come out in Programmatic Perspectives early next year. Mm-hmm. So I love that idea of videoing those things we'll reuse. Mm-hmm. And some of the really big ideas might also be useful to have a video accompaniment to them. So that circles us back 5 minutes later, Michael, to your original question about when you should potentially think of videoing and what parts of your course and that sort of thing.
Right.
On the YouTube chat as well, Tracy and Lowell made some other suggestions about specifically using Lynda, which I've not used, but I've heard good things about.
Oh my God. If your institution has that subscription, you should It saves so much time, particularly if you're teaching a technology production-centered course, that you don't have to try to come up with your own videos or waste a whole lot of class time demonstrating. You can then use lynda.com to do that work for you, and then you can just work on the problems or the specific areas students may have trouble with, demonstrate like one tiny little aspect that's really important. It just does. It's the same thing when we have students read things at home and then we come back and we talk about the big ideas. Lynda.com to me does that same function for production-centered classes. And they have so many really great tutorials now on almost every course that we would teach in technical and professional communication.
I was just going to say, our university does not have Lynda, and it's really expensive to buy it for the whole department. But I've argued that professional and technical writing faculty need to have subscriptions. And so far, the department has been paying for them for us to have them.
Which is great, because then that helps with your own professional development and that always sticky problem of how do we as faculty keep up with the technology.
It's a really good way to spend end of the year money.
Wow, that's a great idea, Joanna. Oh, sorry for the big pause there. I was over in the YouTube channel to see if there was, trying to catch myself up over there.
Same.
I just need to focus, and then somebody else can tell me what's happening over there that we may need to pay attention to. I am just kind of sitting here kind of over the moon that we have so many people and we will fix these technological problems and find a bigger space for the next time that we do this. I do want to ask the broad question to the group as a whole. How do you narrow down what you have students to read? What are your strategies? Or is it just me that worries with, I want them to read everything under the sun and then know that that's not possible. So what are your narrowing down strategies?
That's a great question.
If I'm being honest, my strategy is to assign too much and then midway through the semester, cut half of it. And then I look really magnanimous and also unplanned. That is something I've been struggling with. So I would love to hear from others.
My strategy that's been working the last couple of semesters is they get a journal article once a week. And this is for undergraduate students. So just to be clear, it's like a 3,000 level class. They get a journal article once a week. And then it's a 2-day class. It's a Tuesday, Thursday class. And so on Tuesday, they come in with questions and we go over the article. And then on Thursday, they come in and they have to bring in an example related to it.
Oh, that's nice.
Really helped with engagement.
That's nice.
Yeah, this is Alice. I have tried out something that's similar to what Joanna's doing. And part of the challenge is when you're designing or developing a course is to pace the reading. we all just said that. But I will, at the beginning of the term, assign reading groups. I put students now in reading groups. And instead of everyone reading everything, what I try to do is, or what I have done, is those additional readings. We all do the same basic reading, but then additional readings I'll assign to a group. And they're, like Joanna said, they'll come in with questions, and then we come in with answers. But each group takes responsibility for a certain reading to explain it to the rest of the class. It's just practical because I know that every class they go into, they're being asked to read lots of stuff.
That's a good strategy too. That way you can get a little more coverage, but then you're having students participate in their own learning. I like it.
One thing that I do, and I cribbed this from one of my graduate instructors, is to only assign what's essential and then label the rest of it as optional. So if they want more resources on a particular subject, they have them, or if there's something they're stuck with, they have the resources, but we don't necessarily have to focus on it.
Yeah, that's precisely my approach as well, especially because I have a mix of upper division and master's students. It gives the more advanced students some way to extend into.
Do students really read some of the optional readings?
Sometimes, but honestly, it's often only sometimes on the required stuff too. So.
No, and I get that. We could talk an entire hour about how do we get students to read what they're asked to read. But in this case, since this is all about the faculty right here, it's all about us. That was why I asked the question about how we could potentially pare it down. Because for me, I always struggle with not only paring it down, but in a lot of the tech comm courses is to have to our own published scholarship compared to some of the stuff, out in industry and trade publications, blogs written by, some of the thought leaders and, practicing thought leader type people, and had, not only pare it down, but then what's the balance between that? It's always so tricky. Other thoughts on paring down readings or dealing with readings in the course?
I use 3/4 non-academic, mostly because I teach a lot of business majors who are not going to read journal articles,
right?
Per se. But I use things like Ask Miss Manager. It tends to work really well for whenever they have to do the responses online, because they see the practicality of it. Whereas a lot of the journal articles I've used in the past, it just seems so foreign to them because they're not going to do graduate study.
Mm-hmm.
So I just find that 3/4 approach works a lot better, even if it's something like an old Gawker article about the guy who dressed in a tutu for Halloween and got fired at the Irish bank because he lied to his boss about being sick when he was really hungover. Stuff like that resonates, and sometimes it's just getting them in to want more about that. So what is employment law? So you can pivot from that to look more at deeper subjects.
Mm-hmm. Lol and YouTube. Yay, another over assigner. But also mentioned front-loading readings in the semester. That's something that I did for, not on purpose, by cutting a bunch of readings at the end. One of the service classes I teach, which is mostly chemists this semester, and I had not front-loaded the readings. I had sort of spaced them evenly, and then realized, 4 weeks out from the end of the semester, our time was better spent just looking at their writing in class literally every day for the last, 4 weeks or so. So I'm going back to that approach. I know for most of the service courses, like readings, maybe the first 8 weeks for a 15-week semester, and then paring them down. And by the last couple of weeks, just really like, I'm just going to put your stuff up on the doc cam and we're going to go through it paragraph by paragraph.
Yeah, I like the front loading idea too. I do that particularly in graduate courses that are production centered. You still have to do all of this. You still need to know stuff before you can produce stuff. And so in those sorts of classes, I always front load everything.
One thing that that I like using in order to keep the readings down is to find a foundational example or two, particularly if I'm working in a specific, if I'm working with a very specific discourse, if I can find a longer genre example that they're not going to work fully through or not going to fully understand the first time around, something that we can come back to multiple times throughout the course of the term. That way they're not having to read through a lot of different samples. They can essentially go back to the same sample, which is a little bit faster to break through, to help cut down some of that reading.
We are about 2 minutes away from being together for an hour, and it went so fast. Does anybody have any final thoughts? It can be about reading. It can be if you had to give one piece of your best advice on how to build a course, what would it be?
I super want to share Chris's point from the YouTube chat about reading. He suggested go open source only for at least the first 2 weeks, which I think is a great idea to help out students who are, don't have textbooks yet, waiting on financial aid.
Oh yeah, I typically don't ever have students buy pretty much anything. So that is a great point. Thank you, Chris, in the YouTube chat for telling us that. Any final, course planning wisdom, as Sarah Doan says in the chat?
Just keep a Google Doc open at all times, or not at all times, but I have one for each course, and then as I bump into readings that might be fun or assignments that might be fun, I just throw them in there until the next time I teach that course.
Yeah, I think Tracy made that same comment over in the YouTube channel.
Oh.
No, which is fine. Way back when. So I'm glad that you bring it up. You're circling us back around. Any other final thoughts?
I think that the Facebook pages that we have, whether it's Flux or the Rhetoric and Tech Com one, are really great resources when they've been used. I know Emily January Peterson at Weber State has posted some really good questions before. And it's just a great little resource I think most people either aren't looking at or aren't utilizing as much as we probably could.
It's an ongoing problem. We're very dispersed where we view things, what our communication channels are, how often we look at certain things. And when we were talking about planning this, that's one of the reasons that we pasted it in all the old school places and the new school places and to try to reach everybody. And it's just really difficult. But I believe we would all agree that, my God, this was really successful. I am so thankful for each and every one of you for showing up and for contributing and for talking. And our little planning team will get back together and come up with a better technological medium for us so we can all be in one place.
Find something.
No, I have some ideas. We're gonna come up with one, but the point is, be on the lookout. Since this one was so great, I think we're gonna try to do them probably once a month, and we'll see how we can keep it moving forward. If there's just something you're dying to know about, shoot one of us a message on some communication medium, And we'll put it into the topics for our next faculty office hours. I am so thrilled that you all took your time out of your end of your term or the beginning of your break to visit and share your ideas. So
yeah, absolutely. It was great.
Thanks everyone, and go forth and be certain that you take time to rest over the over your break. And if you have course planning strategies or you hit questions that you need answers to, again, hit us on Twitter or some other medium and we can talk through them. Thanks everybody for coming, and we'll all talk again soon. Happy holidays.
Bye everybody.
Oh, I love it.